Class 111. It's Alita. I'm up here in snowy, cold Maine, and I am doing my video for the future of my project. Just to recap, my project was to increase physical activity amongst pregnant women in Lewiston, Maine. I was able to go back to my clinic last Friday and meet with my preceptor, Jane Mills, who's a midwife in the clinic. She was so excited to hear about my project and look at my binder and chat about the statistics I found. I reiterated the national objective from Healthy People, the ACOG opinion statement in regards to exercise in pregnant women, and her own statistics amongst her patients at her clinic. So that was kind of neat. I also was able to talk with the office manager, who is also a nurse, their nurse practitioner, and a couple of their medical assistants in the office. So that was nice. I discussed the interventions that I created for both the patients and the providers. So one was to have a little packet that included pamphlets of community resources for the patients. That would help with any barriers that they may feel is why they do not exercise, such as transportation or lack of funds for facilities or places to exercise. So I made one packet for them that included pamphlets and handouts from each of those sources. And then I made a handout for the providers as just a reminder. They all have the knowledge base. Just a reminder of the national objectives from Healthy People 2020 in regard to physical activity, ACOG committee statement about pregnant women and exercising, just as a reminder as well, and some of the Scholarly Foundation articles that I read that were interesting that I thought that they might like to read as well in regards to lack of assessment and education given by providers regarding physical activity. They have such quick appointments that I don't think it's always touched upon. My adequacy, I think that my interventions were adequate. I think that it hopefully will help some of that aggregate, and my preceptor found them adequate as well and thought they were great. Sustainability, I think that they would be able to sustain this as long as they take the time to assess the patients, ask them how much activity they're doing. It's free. It's free to ask and assess and verbally give recommendations. And all they need to do if somebody expresses a need that they have for transportation or for funds, all they have to do is pull out my binder and make copies of the pamphlets that I have in there. That's what they chose to do. They really wanted to just keep the binder, and then they'll make copies as they go along of the pamphlets and the walking trails and the transportation services. They'll make copies and hand them out to patients. So I think it's easy to sustain. I think it's feasible. It's free. It's a matter of passing along the education, passing along the recommendations, making copies of the pamphlets for the patients. So I think it's definitely sustainable and feasible. As far as suggested improvements, nobody really had any suggested improvements. They all kind of know how important it is and were pleased with the interventions that I gave them. As far as reaction and feedback, the feedback was very positive. My preceptor loved it. She loved the time it took to put into it. The packet of the community resources for the patients, she enjoyed that and seemed very willing to utilize them and offer them to the patients. The nurse manager, she let me give my whole spiel on my project and my binder and the importance of reiterating to the providers of how important it is to reiterate it to the patients. She wasn't really surprised at the lack of maybe documentation of exercise amongst the pregnant patients because once again it comes down to time and priorities, and she said, it's all about prioritizing in those appointments, and sometimes I'm sure that doesn't get touched. The medical assistants were more than happy and very excited to pass along the interventions and give feedback back to Jane Mills, my preceptor. And that's what they plan to do by next Friday the 14th. They are hoping that during this week, and it is kind of short term, they didn't have much time, but to try and evaluate my impact objectives, the short term goals, they were going to ask and assess each of the patients along with the midwife, and if they came across a patient that had verbalized a need, they were going to implement the interventions. They were going to let my midwife know, and she's going to email me back at the end of this week, Friday, and let me know if they were able to use any of the interventions. And the nurse practitioner in the office was very excited. In fact, she came to me and said, Alita, since the last time you were here, I've actually focused more on people's BMIs and their activity levels and really noticed how many patients I have with high BMIs and trying to be better at talking about that and educating and giving recommendations. So that was kind of neat. I think that was probably the best part. Whether they actually use my interventions at the end of this week or not, I think just hearing that I made some sort of impact when I was in there, just researching and doing statistics and planning goals, was pretty neat. So hopefully the future of my project just makes an impact in the providers and helps the patients in some way. And that's it. Thank you.